Founder of Hope for Niger Delta campaign, Comrade Sonny Ofehe, is a frontline activist based in the Netherlands. At the peak of the Niger Delta struggle in 1995, which coincided with the extrajudicial killing of the Ogoni Nine, Comrade Ofehe had taken refuge in the Netherlands after taking the Abacha-led military junta to task in those turbulent times. For championing the Niger Delta struggle, Comrade Ofehe has suffered many persecutions. On several occasions, he was arrested and his house raided by security operatives, but he has continued to soldier on in his campaign for justice and equity in the Niger Delta. In part one of the following interview, Comrade Ofehe recounts what led him to establish Hope for Niger Delta campaign and some of the troubles he has had to contend with in his bid to ensure the realization of a better Niger Delta. Before we go into the real issues, affecting the Niger Delta, tell me, how's it been like, all these past years, having to suffer persecution, as it were, because of your passion for the Niger Delta?
Yeah. Well, it has not been easy at all because I left Nigeria in 1995 to the Netherlands in the wake of the assassination of Ken Saro-Wiwa and the 8 other Ogoni activists. And because of the complacency, the fact that Shell was mentioned in the deaths of these activists, it made a whole lot of news in the Netherlands, which happened to be the headquarters of Shell. So when I got to the Netherlands, a lot of people were asking me questions about the role of Shell in the killing of these Ogoni activists, and also in the course of reporting that there were a lot of reports that were published internationally on the environmental degradation in the Niger Delta area and how it has affected the human conditions of the people. So I started realizing that the interest to understand what we were suffering was beginning to get international attention. Yes. So I wanted to also make my contribution to that effect. So I also realized that even the journalists were not properly informed because it was a remote area in the Niger Delta. Most of them were not having the opportunity to visit the Niger Delta. So in 2006, I started an NGO called Hope for Niger Delta campaign. And the reason why I started that NGO was to address some of the environmental and human rights issues resulting from oil extractions in the Niger Delta. And I was further motivated to do that because when I moved to Rotterdam, Rotterdam happened to be an oil refining city in the Netherlands. At that time, Rotterdam had the biggest seaport in the world, and so there were a lot of marine and oil and gas activities taking place in the area. So I was able to see the double standard on how Shell, as a multinational oil company, was operating in the Netherlands and how they were also operating in the Niger Delta region. So I saw that there were many things that were not done properly. So we started using the NGO to sort of like address some of these issues. And then in the course of discussing the problems of our people, there was need for me to also provide them evidence in relation to how our people were responding to oil spills, destroying the water and the land, and also gas flaring. So that was how we started. And then I also realized that in the course of time that there were a lot of renowned international NGOs that also wanted to make contribution to seeing the situation being bettered. Organizations like Amnesty International, Friends of the Earth. So we started working in collaboration. And it was not easy being a Nigerian working from an isolation. And so I became the soft target for some kind of persecution. But it did not really deter me because I realized that if I don't do what I need to do, who will be the person to do that? Somebody needed to address the plight of our people on that international level. So I wasn't disturbed at all, so I started also combining activism with lobby, and then I started looking for the relevant European political parties who are more environmentally friendly, like the Green Party, and then the Socialist Party, and also, of course, the Labour Party. So at one time, I had the opportunity to engage members of the Dutch Parliament from the Socialist Party and from the Labour Party to visit the Niger Delta area. So I brought them to Oben, our local government area. Yes. The reason for Oben was for them to see the effect of gas flaring on the inhabitants of those areas, particularly those who live very close to oil extractive areas. So, and then we went to Abonema in River State for them to also see oil spills, and not just oil spills, but to also see how illegal oil bunkering activities have also affected the environment of the people. And then, of course, when we got back to the Netherlands, the members of parliament had to press for a parliamentary hearing, and Shell was invited to speak in that gathering. And then I was also invited to talk about my experience in the Niger Delta. And then 11 days after, my house was raided by 35 Dutch police officers. I was arrested, and I was detained for 2 weeks. All sort of charges were thrown at me, and but it was also something that became very emotional, because at the same time I had a lot of Dutch people who stood up and supported me, because I saw it as persecution. I saw it as profiling. I'm not a criminal, so I was able to come out of it in a way that it gave me more insight into how corporate greed can also lead to silencing of voices who want to stand for justice. And then getting to the Netherlands, I realized that you cannot afford to have pipelines running crude and make them run above the ground. Under international law, that is already a criminal act. They're supposed to be buried in the ground.
Yeah, but we have these infractions everywhere. I mean, you can see the pipelines crisscrossing the Niger Delta surface. Yeah. From time to time, they are still there. Yes. They're still, running out, through villages, towns, communities. On top of that, in spite of all the international, agitation against gas flaring, we still continue to flare gas endlessly. In spite of the agitation, the cry, people in the Niger Delta, unfortunately, it does appear that very little change is taking place, albeit very slowly.
There are many layers to it. When I speak at international event, the first question they ask me, which is a very good question, is why will you talk about infrastructural development? And you start mentioning companies like Shell. Shell is a business. It's a company that is coming to your area to make business. They pay taxes, they pay royalties, they pay everything that they are entitled to pay to the government. They pay to the government. So providing school, pipe-borne water, hospitals are supposed to be the function of the government. So I normally tell them that, yes, of course. I mean, that's supposed to be how it is. That's supposed to be the approach and how it works. But even in business, there's what we call corporate social responsibility. And that means that even when you make profits, you have to see to the human conditions of the people that live in the environment where you do your business. And then you have to ensure that you have a good relationship with the people, and that in the course of your doing your business, you don't leave the environment polluted. You don't leave them with health consequences as a result of your operations. And so we understand that as a corporation, in course of doing business, we see things like accidents, even in developed countries. So when there are oil spills, we do not say that you cannot spill, you do not have to spill oil. For instance, the whole of the pipeline crisscrossing the delta, some of them are very old. Some of them have not been replaced for 30-something years. So they become corrosive, they start leaking oil. Every day we talk about Ogoni cleanup, Ogoni pollution. I mean, what we fail to realize is that oil production actually stopped in Ogoni in 1993. And yet we're talking about Ogoni community being polluted. Where's the pollution coming from? The pollution is actually coming from pipelines that are still running through Ogoni to other flow stations. So due to the old nature of the pipes, the corrosive nature of the pipes, the leakages that are coming from the pipe, the communities are still feeling the impact of pollution. So those are the areas that need to be addressed. And so when you have such an accident, what do? You go there, you assess the damage, you remediate the environment, then you compensate the people who have been affected by such an action. So if these are done in accordance with how it should be done, we don't have a problem. In the Netherlands, once you flare, you pay. You pay even to the people who are living in that area. We cannot see an improved situation where even the agencies that are supposed to carry out the oversight on the oil companies to ensure that, the flaring, there is reduction and complete stop to gas flare in the area. Those agencies are non-existent, either because they are not properly funded or they don't have the technical know-how to be able to monitor the activities of the oil company and reprimand those oil companies when they don't follow internationally laid down standards. So what I personally ask on those platforms is that we're not against Shell. We're not against them doing their operations, of course. Shell has created some kind of employment possibilities for the people. But what we're against is the manner with which they carry out their operations in the Niger Delta. As a multinational oil company, there shouldn't be double standard at all.
Inside the Niger Delta.